It had been a while since I'd seen my wife this excited. She was buzzing around the house in a rush, fixing pillows, reheating appetizers, dimming and brightening lights like she couldn't decide what vibe she was going for. It wasn't like her to get this worked up about hosting, especially for people I hadn't even met. They were her new friends, as she called them, a group from her new job, mostly co-workers and creative types, according to her. She started hanging out with them more often lately, after work drinks, weekend meetups, the occasional group trip. At first, I hadn't thought anything of it. People change, right? She had a new role, new energy, a new lifestyle. I figured I'd catch up eventually. This dinner was supposed to be the start of that. She said it so casually a week ago. Hey, I was thinking maybe we could host my crew for dinner Saturday. You cool with that? As if I hadn't been practically begging her to let me be a part of her new world. I said yes immediately, even offered to cook. She declined, said she had it under control. So I just stayed out of her way, watching her turn our place into something that didn't feel quite like home anymore. Maybe it was the candles or the furniture she rearranged, or maybe it was that I felt like a guest in my own house, like this wasn't meant for me. They arrived in waves, 5 of them, mostly women, one guy who looked like he stepped out of a fashion shoot. Everyone was polite, loud, and way too comfortable, like they'd been here before. I didn't recognize a single face, but they all seemed to know me. You must be the husband, one of them said, smiling, as she handed me a bottle of wine we'd never drink. He's even cuter than the photos, another one laughed, and I wasn't sure if I was supposed to thank her or laugh too. I settled for a weak smile. Dinner was nice, I guess. She made some roasted vegetable dish that tasted better than it looked, and they all gushed over it like she was a 5-star chef. I sat there quietly for most of it, trying to listen and join in without sounding like I didn't belong. I noticed how she never introduced me beyond a quick, "This is him." No name, no warmth, like I was just one more item on the table. A chair filled. Then it happened. One of the women, Chloe, I think, asked how long we'd been married. Normal enough question, right? My wife didn't even look at me when she answered. She laughed and waved her hand like it wasn't important. Oh, him? He's just my roommate at this point. Roommate. That word hit me harder than I expected. I chuckled awkwardly, waiting for her to follow it up with a smile or something to let everyone know she was joking. She didn't. The group laughed, some louder than others, but I caught a few glances. Pity, maybe? Discomfort? Even the guy who looked like a model raised an eyebrow and shifted in his seat. I excused myself a few minutes later, claiming I had a work call, and stepped outside. I just needed air and some space to wrap my head around what I just heard. Roommate? We'd been married almost 4 years. We'd been through so much together. I'd been her cheerleader, her safe space, her sounding board. And now I was a punchline? I stayed out there longer than I meant to. Eventually I heard chairs moving, shoes shuffling, and people laughing as they walked out the door. I didn't go back inside until the house was quiet again. She was in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher like nothing had happened. I asked her point blank what that was about. Why did she say what she said? Why did she call me a roommate in front of strangers like I was some random guy she barely tolerated? She rolled her eyes. Oh my God, are you seriously mad about that? It was a joke. A joke. She said it like I was crazy for feeling anything, like I hadn't just been stripped of my place in my own marriage in front of a room full of people I'd never met. I told her it didn't feel like a joke, that her tone, Her expression felt real, like that's how she really saw me. She shrugged. Well, I mean, you don't exactly act like a husband lately. You barely go out. You don't get along with my friends. You don't make an effort. I stood there stunned because I had been making an effort. I'd been trying to connect with her for months, asking questions, offering to join her plans, suggesting date nights. She brushed me off every single time. And now she was telling me that I was the problem? I didn't yell. I didn't start a fight. I just nodded and walked out the room because if that's how she felt, if that's how she really saw me, then I didn't need to hear anything else that night. But something strange happened the next day. Two of the women from that dinner messaged me on Instagram. They were polite but direct. One of them, Chloe again, I think, said she felt uncomfortable about something she heard after dinner. Something my wife had said when I wasn't around. She didn't go into detail, just said that if I ever wanted clarity, she'd be happy to talk. The other one, Tara, she wasn't as vague. She sent me screenshots of messages between my wife and someone saved in her phone as Jay. The messages were explicit, romantic, intimate. The timestamps overlapped with nights she told me she was out with the girls. The man in the texts wasn't just some harmless flirtation. He was one of the people at dinner. Suddenly, the roommate comment didn't feel like a joke at all. It felt like a soft launch of a life she was already living without me. Update 1. I didn't sleep that night, not a single minute. I sat on the living room couch with the screenshots pulled up on my phone over and over again, just staring at them, like the meaning might change if I looked long enough. It didn't. They were still there, her words, her emojis, words like, "Our time is coming," and "He's just there until I can be honest." Pictures I wish I could unsee. The kind of things you say when you're already written someone out of your life. You just haven't told them yet. But what really gutted me wasn't the affair. It was the performance. Sitting across from me at dinner, laughing with her friends, planning a menu, playing the role of a wife while quietly erasing me from her reality. And she had the nerve to call that betrayal a joke. No, that was a preview. That night at dinner was her testing the waters, seeing how I'd react if she spoke her truth. And when I didn't explode, when I didn't challenge her on the spot, she assumed I'd just stay quiet forever. She mistook my shock for weakness. That was her mistake. The next morning I woke up still in the clothes I'd worn the day before. My phone buzzed with a follow-up message from Chloe, the friend who had first messaged me after the dinner. She said she hadn't wanted to interfere, but she'd been friends with Jay before my wife met him. That she distanced herself after she saw how casually they flaunted the relationship behind my back. She said she didn't want to be complicit in something so cruel. She ended her message with, "You deserve to know. People like her don't stop unless someone finally sees them for who they are." I didn't respond right away. What could I say? I showered, changed, and went back into the bedroom to find her still asleep, peaceful, unbothered, as if the last 24 hours hadn't happened. I wanted to scream. I wanted to wake her up and throw the phone in her face and ask her how many lies she had stacked on top of our marriage until it became a house built on sand. But I didn't. Instead, I went to work like I always did, because I needed time, not to think, but to prepare. By midweek, I contacted a lawyer. It wasn't a rash decision. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. I wasn't interested in shouting matches or begging for remorse. I spent years accommodating her moods, managing her silences, and covering for her when she changed plans last minute or avoided our friends. I had rationalized every distance she created. I was done doing that. My lawyer was professional and kind, the kind of man who had clearly seen every possible way a marriage could fall apart. He didn't blink when I laid out the story. He just asked for dates, documents, copies of the screenshots. We started the filing process that day. I didn't tell her immediately. Part of me wanted to wait until I had everything lined up. Another part of me, maybe a pettier part, wanted her to go on living in the fantasy that I hadn't caught on. I wanted to see if she'd admit anything, apologize, maybe even try to spin it one last time. 2 weeks after filing, I got my chance. We were in the kitchen. She was cooking pasta like nothing had changed. She hummed while stirring the sauce and even asked me if I could help set the table. I did. She made some small talk about her week. She mentioned that Jay had left town for a bit, and I almost laughed at how casually she slid that in, like I wouldn't connect the dots. And then out of nowhere, she said, "Are you still upset about the roommate comment? Seriously?" I just stared at her. She kept going. "You've been cold all week. It was just a joke. Everyone laughed. You can't seriously still be clinging to that, right?" That was the moment I realized she genuinely believed she could gaslight me into thinking I was the problem. So I told her that I knew that her friends weren't as loyal as she thought, that I had proof, that I'd filed for divorce. The shift in her face was something I'll never forget. Her smile collapsed. Her eyes didn't widen. They narrowed. She wasn't shocked. She was angry that I had taken the narrative away from her. She launched into defense mode immediately. "You're blowing this out of proportion. You weren't even around lately. It didn't mean anything. You were the one who gave up on us first." Every excuse in the book, but I didn't flinch. I told her I wasn't interested in passing out blame anymore. I wasn't interested in hearing her half-truths. The marriage had been dead the moment she decided to introduce herself to the world as someone else's future while keeping me as background noise. Her final shot was pathetic. "So you're just going to throw it all away over one mistake?" I said nothing, because she hadn't made one mistake. She made a choice again and again, and now she was just mad that I finally made one too. That night, I slept in the guest room. In the morning, I left for work while she stayed curled up in our bed, probably texting someone else about how dramatic I was being. Probably still believing this was just a phase and I'd get over it. She didn't know the paperwork was already in motion. She didn't realize that the version of me who tolerated her disrespect no longer lived here. Update 2. By the end of the week, the atmosphere in the house was unbearable. She was still pretending like things could be salvaged, leaving notes near the coffee machine, asking if I wanted to talk, offering to revisit therapy like this was just a marital rough patch instead of a full-blown implosion she had engineered with her bare hands. But the act wasn't even convincing anymore. It was half-hearted, delayed, like she wasn't even sure how to sell the role of regretful wife. Maybe because it wasn't her first instinct. Her first instinct had always been control. And now she didn't have any. My lawyer had advised me to remain civil until the paperwork was in motion. But once it was clear she wasn't taking the hint, I had to draw the line. She came home late on a Thursday evening, smelling like wine and wearing the same look I'd seen after countless so-called networking nights. I didn't say anything until the next morning. We were in the kitchen again and she was pouring coffee like she belonged there, like this was just another normal day. I set the manila envelope down on the counter. It contained a printed copy of the filed divorce papers and a short note detailing what I expected next. That she leave the house within a week. That her clothes, personal items, and whatever wasn't joint property would be boxed up and available for her to collect. That I was done pretending. She didn't speak for a long time. When she finally looked up, it was like she didn't recognize me. You're kicking me out? I nodded once. She blinked, trying to process the new terms. But this is my house, too. I cut her off. No, it's my house. It was supposed to be ours. But you treated it like a hotel, like it was just a convenient place to keep your husband on standby while you shopped for replacements. Her tone switched instantly, pleading but laced with indignation. It wasn't like that. I made a mistake. It didn't mean anything. I leaned forward, calm and direct. Then you shouldn't have done it. I told her she could go stay with one of her buddies. Maybe even Jay if he was still in the picture. Maybe ask the people she'd invited over for that cursed dinner to house her for a while. They laughed at her joke after all. Maybe they'd laugh again. And that's when she cracked. You're not being fair. You're just trying to punish me. She still didn't get it. This wasn't punishment. These were consequences. The fallout didn't take long to hit. Turns out her friends weren't as loyal to her as she thought, especially when confronted with the mess she dragged them into. One by one, I started getting indirect updates from people I barely knew. Chloe messaged me again and told me some of the others had been blindsided by how messy it got. That even Jay, the guy at the center of it all, had no idea she wasn't in an open marriage until after the dinner. She'd lied to him too. She told him we were on a break, that we were figuring things out, that it was complicated and that is why we were trying out an open marriage. And when he realized she was lying, he bailed hard. I didn't gloat, but I also didn't feel bad. Apparently, when he found out she'd been calling me a roommate behind my back to the rest of his friends who weren't at the dinner, while still enjoying the perks of married life, he cut ties instantly. From what I heard, he blocked her on everything, sent a mutual friend to collect a few things she'd left at his place, and told her she needed help. For once, I agreed with him. She came by one evening that week to collect her things. I had packed everything neatly in boxes, labeled them, and placed them by the front door. She tried to talk. She said she was sorry she'd made a huge mistake and didn't know how to come back from it. She said we had history and asked if I really wanted to throw it away over some mistakes and misunderstandings. And that's when I realized that she still didn't understand. This wasn't about a single affair. This was about how easily she erased me from her life. How she could sit in our home surrounded by strangers and laugh about me, like I was some random guy renting a room in our house. That wasn't a slip. That was honesty. She thought I wasn't good enough for her anymore. And now she had to live with that truth too. So I looked at her and said plainly, you left this marriage the day you stopped seeing me as your husband. I'm just finishing what you started. She didn't say goodbye when she left. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected, peaceful even. No more tense silences, no more waiting up, no more wondering if she was lying or just detached. The space felt lighter too. The paperwork moved quickly. She didn't contest. Maybe because she knew she didn't have a case. Maybe because she had no one left to play to. From what I gathered through mutual circles, she had tried to save face at first, told people we had been drifting and that I had always been too sensitive. But those same people had seen the screenshots because I had shown them. They knew about her dinner party comment, and some of them told her straight up that they didn't want to be part of her spin game. She wasn't just losing a husband, she was losing her audience. I didn't celebrate the day the divorce was finalized. I just went to the notary's office, signed my name, went home. That evening, I poured myself a drink, sat on the couch and took a deep breath. No noise, no tension, no performance. Update 3. 2 months passed. She was gone. Not just from my phone, but from my life. At first, I stayed busy. Work, errands, and home repairs I'd been putting off. A bit of therapy, a lot of music. I'd even started sleeping better, deeper, like my brain no longer had to work overtime at night trying to solve a puzzle. But it gets quiet too. Too quiet sometimes. That's probably how I ended up saying yes when my coworker Luke invited me out for drinks on a Friday night. He said I needed to touch grass again. I don't know if bars count as grass, but I took the hint. We hit a small, dimly lit club downtown. Nothing wild, just enough music to drown out thoughts and enough alcohol to blur the edges a little. And then I saw her. Not her, but her friend. One of the women who had come to that dinner. The one who had reached out after the fact. The one who'd messaged me. I hadn't realized she was the one my wife had been staying with after I kicked her out. Guess that made sense. Birds of a feather and all. Her name was Tara, and she was leaning against the bar with a half-empty glass of something red. She looked better than I remembered, or maybe it was just the lighting, or the fact that it had been quite long since I had gone out. She spotted me first, smiled in a way that said, "Well, this is unexpected." I walked over, ordered a drink, asked how life was going. She laughed and said she was still detoxing from the drama my ex-wife brought into her apartment. I asked if she was still there. Tara snorted. "Oh, hell no." Apparently the sympathy had a short expiration date. She said my ex started acting entitled, treating Tara's apartment like a hotel with maid service, complained when asked to help with dishes, slept all day, drank all night, spent hours trash-talking me to anyone who'd listen, even after the affair blew up. She still thinks she's the victim, Tara said, sipping her drink with a slow shake of her head. Like she was robbed of something. I didn't say much, just nodded because, yeah, that sounded about right. We stayed at the bar for another round and then a third. Somewhere between her second tequila and my fourth beer, things got blurry. She touched my arm once when she laughed. I brushed her knee accidentally and didn't move away. We were too close, too fast, but somehow it didn't feel forced. We ended up back at her place. It wasn't romantic, just two adults riding out the wreckage of their pasts with the kind of reckless energy that doesn't ask permission. Clothes came off without much thought and even less conversation. It was impulsive, messy, real. And when we woke up the next morning, tangled in sheets, hair messy, breath stale, she didn't freak out, neither did I. Instead, she reached for me again, and I didn't say no. Later, as we lay there with the curtains pulled halfway shut and the day slowly creeping in, she looked over and said, "You good?" I nodded. She smirked. "No post-regret panic?" I laughed. "None. You?" "Not even close." There was no promise, no awkward talk about what this meant, no guilt, and maybe that's why it worked. Because it didn't mean everything, but it didn't mean nothing either. I didn't expect to see her again after that, but a few days later she texted, "I made pasta. It's too much for one. You in?" I hesitated for maybe 5 seconds before replying, "Yeah, be there in 30. It became a thing. Not official, not dramatic, just easy. Sometimes we slept together, sometimes we didn't. Sometimes we just watched TV, sometimes she vented about work, and sometimes I talked about Mia, my new dog. Not a kid, thank God. Tara never asked for anything. She didn't push. And I didn't ask her what she thought this was supposed to be, because honestly, for the first time in a while, I was just enjoying something without waiting for the other shoe to drop. But the irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, sleeping with someone who had once been a thread in my ex-wife's tangled web, and yet it felt right. Because Tara hadn't lied to me. She hadn't insulted me in front of strangers. She hadn't snuck around behind my back. She hadn't made me feel like a ghost in my own marriage. If anything, she'd warned me. If anything, she'd done what no one else had the guts to do. A few people from my old circle started to notice. One even sent a passive-aggressive DM. She was my ex's friend more than mine. "So you're hooking up with her friend now? Real classy." I didn't reply because I didn't owe anyone a polished narrative, especially not people who stayed silent when my ex dragged my name through the dirt. I knew what they were thinking, that I was being petty, that this was revenge, but it wasn't. This wasn't about her, this was about me, choosing what felt good. Tara wasn't a rebound. She was an anchor. Update 4. Tara and I were something. Not defined, not dissected, just something that felt good and uncomplicated, which was more than I could say about anything in my last year of marriage. We saw each other a few times a week. Some nights I stayed over, others I didn't. It was easy. That Friday, she wanted to go out, said it had been a long week and she needed a little chaos. She asked me to come with her and a couple of her friends to this newly reopened rooftop club. Loud music, overpriced cocktails, bodies pressed together under neon lighting. Definitely not my usual scene anymore, but I went. The place was packed. Lights throbbed overhead, bass underfoot, and the scent of cologne, sweat, and too much perfume made the air feel like it might catch fire. Tara thrived in that kind of atmosphere. She had this energy that pulled people in without even trying. She laughed like nothing could touch her and danced like every song was her favorite. At some point, I stopped caring about anything outside the tiny radius we'd carved out. We were pressed close, her fingers curled into my shirt, her lips brushing mine as we kissed under the strobes like we were the only ones alive. And then I felt it, something shift. Tara pulled back first, just slightly, her eyes drifting past my shoulder. I followed her gaze and saw her, my ex, standing not far from the entrance, frozen mid-step, eyes locked on us. Her expression was a mix of shock, disbelief, and the kind of pain that only shows up when someone realizes they were never as indispensable as they assumed. She didn't move right away, just stared. Then she started walking straight towards us. I didn't move. Tara stepped slightly to the side, letting her pass without confrontation, but I stood where I was. This wasn't going to be one of those awkward bar moments where you pretend not to see each other. She wanted this to be a scene? Fine. She stopped in front of me, eyebrows drawn, lips trembling more with fury than sadness. Her voice cut through the bass like she was asked if I was seriously doing this. With her, of all people. I didn't answer. She kept going, saying this was pathetic, that I had no shame, that I had clearly waited for the first warm body to roll over to let myself forget what we'd built together. She didn't notice the irony in her words. I told her I wasn't the one who'd forgotten anything. I reminded her that the person she was accusing me of sleeping with now was the same one who had the decency to warn me back when she was too busy playing house with someone else behind my back. She said I was just trying to humiliate her. I shrugged, told her that if she felt humiliated, maybe that was less about me and more about the mirror being shoved in her face. She snapped back that this was revenge, that I was only doing this to get back at her. I let that one hang in the air for a second, then told her she had that backward. This wasn't about her at all. That was the part that seemed to be bothering her the most. She looked like she wanted to argue, to scream, maybe even cry, but none of it came. Just this broken sort of silence. She looked at Tara and then at me again, and I could see it hit her that I wasn't broken, that she hadn't left behind a man waiting in emotional purgatory. I was living, and she was no longer part of that picture. When she realized I wasn't going to stop her or chase her or even ask her to calm down, she turned and stormed off towards the exit. Her friend, someone I vaguely recognized, chased after her, trying to get her to stop and breathe. People stared, but I didn't care. The moment she was out of sight, Tara slid her arm back around my waist and asked if I was good. I said, yeah. She smirked and asked if I wanted another drink or if I was ready to get out of there. The crowd had already gone back to whatever they were doing before she showed up. It was like the whole moment vanished into the noise. I said we should leave. Somewhere quieter sounded better. We ended up back at her place. The silence was comfortable, not heavy. She poured 2 glasses of wine, curled up beside me on the couch, her legs tangled over mine like this had been our routine for years. She said she'd bet good money that my ex would be spinning a new story by morning. I agreed. I said she was probably already posting something cryptic about betrayal and karma. Tara asked if I cared what people believed. I didn't hesitate. I told her I didn't. Anyone who still believed her after everything wasn't someone whose opinion mattered to me. Stay tuned for more stories from Our Girl Relationships.